All right, so welcome. We're going to talk about virtual Heightfield mesh. Starting here with a new scene. I'm going to delete the base plane and create a new landscape. And you can see in our landscape creation settings here, we've got basically some settings we can adjust the size of the landscape. So I'm going to put the location to 0 in the Z, and then I like to scale this to 10 just because it gives me more mesh to work with, kind of. But that's really up to you. You can see how your results will vary. You don't need to scale that down necessarily. And you can see the number we're kind of interested in here is the overall resolution, which is 509 units there. Just keep that in mind. So we're going to need a few things to create this effect. I'm going to start by creating a landscape material. So I'm going to start with a folder here. And I'm going to bring in some textures. With these textures here, I have, this is kind of, there's not much albedo in it, but it's just kind of a simple albedo. And then I have a mask channel here, and I've got in the RGB, I've got packed in a number of channels that are, I think red is my height data in there. This is kind of the main one I'm after. So we're creating a new landscape material. Now I'm not going to get into like landscape layer blending and stuff. There's lots of tutorials and stuff how to do that. I'm just going to do a straight textures here, and what I want here is a runtime virtual texture output, and I want to get the height of the landscape, which is going to just be the world position Z value. So I want to get that. This node has changed a little bit in Unreal 5.2. So I'm going to take that Z value and I'm going to add it to, I'm going to add the texture height to this, and then I can scale that texture height. And this is going to feed our virtual texture output. So that's set up. I'm going to bring my textures in. And let's connect these guys. And again, so red, I've got height information, green, I've got roughness, and blue, I have albedo. The way you pack your textures is totally up to you. It's just the way that I've done this one. And then so this height information, I'm going to multiply it to scale it. So I think default, I'll probably give it like a value of 5 or something, and then you'll see later that this value will we can kind of set how much we want to offset the world height by. Now I will say with Unreal 5, I'm pretty disappointed that they've dropped support for mesh tessellation. Oh, hang on. I've kind of mixed these up a bit here, I think. Let me get these connected in here as well into the runtime virtual texture. Yeah, I'm confused the direction that Unreal is currently going at the moment with. I guess I'm not familiar enough with the new ideas around nanite. I really don't see how it works with anything that is procedurally generated, and there's a few. I can understand there's a few benefits with it, but at this moment it just seems like a real loss overall. So I'll connect this landscape material again. I didn't do any layers or anything, nothing fancy. It's just simple, just one layer, and just to get the idea of feeding these, creating these virtual textures. You can see here there's a bit of a tiling issue. Come back and we'll take the landscape UV landscape coordinates here and just multiply these by a straight value. I can see petitions online for returning mesh tessellation to the shaders here in Unity, in Unreal. So maybe we can sign some of those petitions. See if we can get that back in again. But for the time being, I think this is one way to add tessellation to the terrain, using these this virtual Heightfield mesh. I like to drag a cube in, so that's a meter cube, and can kind of give me an idea of maybe the tiling that I'm after. This is, of course, a material instance. Always work with instances, so you can change your parameters. That's probably fine like that. All right. Some random zooming in and out. Next up, project settings. Something I always do is just turn off auto, auto exposure. I find that's kind of annoying when I'm developing to have that on. So we'll turn that off. And we're looking for virtual, we want to turn on virtual support for virtual textures. So I think it's just, if we just type in virtual here, I think we'll be okay. Sorry, I'm typing in the wrong, I'm typing in Heightfield, I don't need that, I just need the virtual textures here. Enable virtual texture support. And there's one other thing we need to enable, and that's in the plugins, and that's support for the Heightfield. This is where we want to type in Heightfield here, virtual Heightfield mesh. And we have to restart. So we'll save everything, save our level. All right, so we're back in again. And so we need to create some we need to create some virtual textures basically to, they're going to read from the landscape. So we need one for the height and one for the albedo information. I'm just going to adjust the lighting, make it a little bit less bright. And you can adjust yours how you like. And let's create some of those textures. So come down to texture and runtime virtual texture. There's one for the height. And now I say albedo, but it's got some roughness and normal in there as well, but it's just basically the color that's going to carry. So we've got the height, we'll set that to height, world height, and we'll save that. So that's going to read from the height of our landscape, and this will read the color information. And we'll just click on landscape here, and we'll just connect these. So we'll make sure we add them to the landscape. So you remember in the landscape material we had the output, runtime virtual texture output. So this is where it's going to get collected on this side. Just got to find it here. If you type in virtual, I think it should come up. So you can see draw on virtual textures. We're going to add 2, and we're going to draw in the height and the albedo. which is good. So got that set up. And the other bit that we're going to need is some volumes. So these are virtual texture volumes. So this is basically, the best I understand is this works in conjunction with the virtual texture. And what we need to do is figure out the size of our landscape and match this this volume, this texture volume, to the landscape as best we can. So I'll give it the name RVT, runtime virtual texture, height, and then volume. And I've just got to figure out the scale of the landscape to match it. You can see here there's this set bounds from an existing actor. I've tried to set it to landscape here, but it doesn't. It's not doing anything. It doesn't let me set the bounds from the landscape. So it might have been because I scaled my landscape. That could be an issue that caused it to not work. Sometimes that seems to not work. But if I go to my landscape here, I'm just going to take these values and I'll just kind of copy them across. So put these in minus 20. In this case, I mean, yours will vary depending on the scale of your landscape. And then the landscape, that's the offset. The actual size will be double that. So I'll try to do the math in my head. I think it would be 5,080. Is that right? And so I believe that's going to be 5 kilometers or something like that. And then the height. The height, you kind of want this volume to capture kind of any of the painting you're going to do, your landscape. You know, you can adjust the terrain up and down. You want to capture that as much as you can inside of this. So I've kind of, with my volume, I don't know if I've done this right, but I've kind of given it some area above and some area below to try to capture any kind of height painting I do on that landscape, which I haven't done any yet, but I expect on most landscapes you would. So now the virtual texture, I'm going to connect it to the height, and then I want to take this and duplicate it. And this one is going to be for the albedo. Again, we've already got the size here, which is great, so we don't have to set that up again. But we'll just connect in the virtual texture slot. We'll connect the albedo. So those volumes are set, and the runtime virtual textures are set. The last bit of the puzzle now is going to be the Heightfield mesh itself. So we can search for that. Do a quick save. Oh, we're going to organize a bit here. Not that there's a whole lot in the outliner here, but might as well stay organized, right? Okay. And so we're going to search for that Heightfield, virtual Heightfield mesh, and just drag it in. And we want to do the same thing as we did with our volume and match the scale to our terrain. And I should be able to select. I should be able to copy bounds from one of my volumes rather than from the landscape. I think that would work. But here I'm just kind of looking at this and trying to get the same numbers in here. I think these numbers are slightly different, but hopefully it'll still work. I found that putting a negative number in the location, the Z location, will invert the mesh, so I haven't done that, but you can experiment with that if you like. We don't really see it at the moment. Virtual texture, we want the height field. We want to go with the height volume here. And so that's the height field. That's the first thing we need to fill in is our height volume. And then we're going to build the height field just below this. There's a little build button, and there's a min-max texture that we can put in there. So that's all good there. That's all fine. I'm not sure what I'm checking here. Oh, I ended up copying the bounds from that virtual height field volume. Okay, so again, I want to hit build here. I'm just going to save it in this main folder. This takes a minute to build. Yeah, this process is really convoluted as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, I found the old mesh tessellation to be far superior in every way. It included props and stuff as well. So at the moment we don't see it. We've got to turn off actor hidden in editor. Now we can see it, and you can kind of make out the height on there. The only issue is that it's missing the actual surface material. So we're going to create a new material for our virtual height field mesh. So we're going to create a material for this VH. What did I do? VH M material. And we'll go ahead and open that up. And then we want to sample our albedo texture here. So we're going to go for a sample, runtime virtual texture sample. And then if we click this, we can select which one we're after. It's going to be the albedo, and we want the color, the roughness, and the normal. We probably could pack the AO in there somewhere in one of those empty channels. But for this example, we haven't. We just got those three there. So that's done, and we'll just connect this now to our height field mesh. So with the height field mesh selected, we'll come in and select. First, we're going to rename it here. We're going to come down and select the material for it, and now we can see that we have a material on there, and we have that's nice and displaced. And you can see here, if I adjust the height, you'll see that it will rise and fall accordingly. So there's a little bit more extreme kind of offset, raising it up to 10. And it takes a minute. It takes a little while to kind of update. It's not really instantaneous. There we are at 3. Back up to 10 again. You can see that this is responding to our height offset that we've created in our base terrain material. We'll organize these into their own folder, and yeah, I really hope Unreal will add or reconsider removing support for mesh tessellation. It's a bit of a mystery why they removed that. One thing I want to mention here is that the height data itself in the virtual texture, you can reduce that a bit, and you don't really pay a price for that. In fact, it sometimes makes it look better if it's a little bit smoother with a lower texture resolution. So that's something you can look at. The other thing you can look at here is the if you turn on mesh edges here, we can see the tessellation that's happening in the actual mesh field. And then you see in the rendering settings here of the mesh field, we have LOD settings here which we can adjust, and you'll see them update. If you've got that wireframe turned on or mesh edge, you'll be able to adjust the distances and the amount of tessellation that's happening on this height field mesh. So I encourage you to experiment with those and get the look that you're after. get the amount of geometry you actually need, you know, and yeah, that's in visualization. That's pretty much it. I can paint, you know, a little bit of height information in here, and you'll see that this responds. Again, because we're pulling that off of in our material. We were getting that height. We were getting that original Z position, so it gets fed through this all of these volumes and stuff and read into these virtual textures. So you'll see here if I paint this, you know, we'll get that base height plus our material height on there. Yep. Well, that's pretty much it. Convoluted, I know, but there it is. All right, all the best, and hope you have success with your project.